I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. 2 things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to, this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life, truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. About 5 years ago, my now estranged daughter, Edie, cheated on her boyfriend, Brad, and got together with a guy, Ken. He quickly started isolating her from family and my husband from her kids. Brad had moved back to his home state devastated after the breakup. I discussed red flags her. I let her know we are here for her and concerned. Her and Ken suddenly took off and moved to another state. For 5 months, my husband I worried about her and the kids as we had //see at all with them. One day CPS showed up at our door with the oldest child. He was obviously injured from abuse that was reported by the school. We had no idea they had moved back to the area. We agreed to take them in. The next 20 months were traumatic, complicated, emotional, and difficult for everyone. Through it we re-established a relationship with the older child's dad, Dan. Daughter failed to comply with her plan and remained with Ken. Dan worked hard to get custody of his child and he gave Edie scheduled weekly phone calls. She called oldest child 2x nothing since. We agreed to permanent custody of youngest. In the process, I put aside the hurt Edie caused and agreed to scheduled weekly phone calls and supervised visits in person when schedules allowed. Legally, any or no contact is at my sole discretion. Ken was not allowed to interfere //attend. Edie quit calling / scheduling visits after 3 months. I reset the call schedule to 1 month. No calls. 6 months later she calls and wanted me to drop everything for a visit the following day. I couldn't because I had to go back to work. Calls stopped again. She left Ken, has a new BF. I know nothing else about her life / whereabouts. She started calling again about a year ago and I let her know that if she was consistent with her monthly scheduled calls, we would move towards weekly calls again. She called 2 months in a row, skipped a couple months, then called 2 more months in a row. Last one happened to be night before child's birthday. She asked him what he wanted for his birthday. He said a call from her. The next day, as he blew out candles, he said, "My mom is gonna call now." He had the biggest smile on his face. Call never came. He refused my offer to call her. We survived an emotional meltdown. Next month, no call, just a text after with a lame timing excuse as to why and sorry about the birthday call, she didn't feel well. Following month, I get a text that Edie feels ill again, won't be calling. I am beyond frustrated at this point. I have looked past her refusal to rebuild a relationship with us, but when it comes to the kids my heart aches for them. Hey race, where I might be the I responded, parents do not get sick time. We all had COVID recently, including me, and I still took care of the children. If you do not have any time for him once a month, I don't want my time wasted with your excuses. Of course, calls stopped again. I am a 27 years old male. My fiancé, she's 25, has an obvious permanent burn scar from an accident that caused her mother, her only parent, to pass away from injury. My fiancé had a long recovery. It's been 7 years. The scar is on her collarbone. It goes down her chest but isn't showing. Unless she's wearing scoop / square tops. She often wears hoodies / jackets to cover up. She puts this cream, I don't know what ladies call it, but it's supposed to tone skin color or something. I'm not sure, but my fiancé calls it foundation that is 1 degree brighter than her skin color. I absolutely adore her. She's pretty, smart, ambitious, and the list goes on. What happened was unfortunate, and I'm glad she's at peace with herself and more confident. My family love her. How can they not? She's a member of the family. My mom makes sure she takes part in every family function and things like shopping and decorating other things. However, my sister made comments about my fiancé's scar several times. I've called her out on her behavior several times to get her to stop because she was hurting me before my fiancé with her backhanded and insensitive comments. I told my fiancé she had every right to cut my sister out and not deal with her bullshit, but she has been forgiving and respectful of my entire family. Our wedding is in February. My fiancé went shopping for the wedding dress. This is where the issue started. My fiancé showed the wedding dress to my sister. I didn't see it, but I was told it was a spaghetti strap dress. My fiancé likes this stuff. Anyways, my sister saw it and went nuts. She started criticizing her choice and said that she should have gotten a high neck or a jewel wedding dress to cover up the scar. She argued with my fiancé about it. I went to my family's house and I confronted her. I yelled at her after she told me my fiancé needed to return the dress and get a proper one so that guests won't focus on her burn scar and use it as the topic of conversation and gossip. I told her that she's not invited to our wedding. She isn't welcome to my wedding with this entitled attitude of hers and her insensitivity and disrespect. We argued for half an hour, then I left. In exactly an hour, my mom and dad called and berated me, saying my sister was crying after I uninvited her and that I had no right to univindi her. She's my sister and was just trying to help out and give an advice and avoid any unnecessary drama at the wedding. My mom said my fiancé can keep the dress but suggested to wear a bridal shawl as a neutral solution. I stopped responding to my mom's calls and texts after that. Family members were upset my sister was uninvited and wanted me to invite her again, because this will make family look bad in front of outsiders and guests. So me and my girlfriend have been together for about a year now. It's been a big adjustment, but I think we've done well so far. I had 2 kids before her and she isn't used to kids, but I think she's doing well and I think my kids really like her. I'm a widower. My wife passed away a few years ago from cancer. It definitely hit me like a truck and took me a while to recover from. It took me a really long while to get back out there, but I eventually did a few years ago. My daughter is 13. She is in middle school now and is obviously growing. So usually on Thursdays after I drop off my kid and I do some chores, me and my girlfriend usually have a lunch date. Just so you know, this is not at all something that happens all the time. I try my best to be both mom and dad, but I'm still figuring it out. Lately my daughter been moody and very emotional. I had a thought that it could be her period because she's getting to that age on Thursday. A few hours after I dropped her off, I got a call from my daughter, and soon after the school, because she had ended up getting her period in school. She was really upset and crying, and she said that she was really embarrassed. I quickly went to go pick her up and shot my girlfriend a text that I couldn't make it and had to go pick up my daughter. I was low-key freaking out, and that's why I was pretty brief, so I rushed over there really quickly to go pick her up. She was in tears. I brought her home. She got cleaned up. My girlfriend came home while she was in the shower and I explained the situation, but she was still mad. I really wasn't expecting her to be mad. I don't really feel that I stood her up. I still sent her a text. It was really just under heat of the moment and I was really focused on one thing, and it was an honest mistake. She lost it on me, saying that it was a move to leave her hanging like that and not even answer the phone when she was calling her to see why I set her up? I never received a call from her. If she did, I triple-checked. I said I apologize for that, but I was in a rush to go to the store before I went to go pick up my daughter, and I was just focused on one thing. She said that it wasn't an excuse to stand her up. She said that it was just a period. The school gets her a change of clothes and a pad, they have it there, and it wasn't an excuse to be so disrespectful because she was taken care of. I tried saying that she probably just wanted to be in the comfort of her own home and she was really embarrassed, so I should go pick her up. She's still really upset at me, but I really don't get why, given the circumstances, I feel like this was justified. Then I stopped arguing with her to go check on my daughter because she was out of the shower. Me and her talked and everything, and now she's okay.